The Dine Bahane, ancient origin of the Skinwalker tradition in Navajo creation. The power to heal and the power to harm spring from the same sacred source, establishing cosmic duality. Long before the first anthropologists arrived in the American Southwest, long before the first written accounts attempted to capture the complexity of indigenous cosmology, the Navajo people preserved a creation narrative that contained within it a troubling truth about the nature of power itself. The Dine Bahane, the sacred story of emergence and becoming, does not present evil as an intrusion into a perfect world. Instead, it establishes from the very beginning that the forces capable of creating harmony possess an equal capacity for destruction. Within this ancient framework lies the origin of one of the most feared figures in Native American tradition, the Skinwalker. The narrative structure of the Dine Bahane operates on principles fundamentally different from Western creation stories. There is no fall from grace, no serpent in a garden, no moment when corruption enters an unblemished paradise. The Navajo understanding, preserved through generations of oral transmission by the Hatali, the traditional singers and healers, presents the universe as inherently dual in nature. Light and darkness, creation and destruction, healing and harm exist not as opposites in conflict, but as complementary aspects of a unified whole. This cosmological framework provides the context necessary to understand the Skinwalker not as a monster from folklore, but as an integral element of Navajo reality. In the late 19th century, a United States Army surgeon stationed near the Navajo Nation begins a project that would produce the first comprehensive English-language documentation of these sacred narratives. Washington Matthews arrives with medical training and scientific rigor, but he brings something else as well: genuine respect for the intellectual traditions he encounters. For years, Matthews works alongside Navajo singers, learning their language, attending their ceremonies, recording their stories with meticulous attention to detail. In 1897, he publishes Navajo Legends, introducing the English-speaking world to the complexity and sophistication of Navajo cosmology. Matthews documents something that troubles his contemporary readers. The Navajo creation narrative explicitly establishes witchcraft as part of the original order of existence. The knowledge that enables a Hatali to perform healing ceremonies, to restore individuals and communities to a state of Hojo. That essential concept of beauty, balance, and harmony is the same knowledge that can be turned toward destruction. The difference lies not in the nature of the power itself, but in the intention and moral character of the practitioner. A Hatali who chooses to abandon the path of healing and embrace harm becomes something else entirely. The transformation is not supernatural in the sense of violating natural law. It is supernatural in the sense of operating within a different understanding of what nature contains. The documentation Matthews provides establishes several critical points. First, witchcraft in Navajo tradition is not learned from external demonic forces or granted by malevolent spirits. It emerges from the same body of sacred knowledge that produces healing. Second, the practitioner of witchcraft, the figure that would come to be known in English as the Skinwalker, possesses genuine power rooted in cosmological reality rather than mere superstition or psychological projection. Third, the danger posed by such practitioners is existential, threatening not individual lives alone, but the fundamental balance that sustains community and cosmos. The passages Matthews records describe how certain individuals, having acquired the knowledge necessary to perform ceremonies and manipulate the forces that maintain Hojo, make a deliberate choice to invert that knowledge. They learn the prayers and songs that restore balance, then speak them backward. They master the use of sacred materials, then employ them for destruction rather than healing. They understand the intricate relationships between the human world and the spirit world, then exploit those relationships for personal gain rather than communal benefit. The result is a figure of tremendous power operating without moral restraint, bound by neither the ethical codes of the community nor the ceremonial protocols that govern legitimate spiritual practice. Nearly a century after Matthews completes his work, another scholar approaches the same material from a different angle. Paul Zolbrod, a professor of literature at Allegheny College, recognizes that Matthews, for all his diligence and respect, had captured only a portion of the narrative complexity embedded in the Navajo oral tradition. Working extensively with Navajo scholars and community members throughout the late 20th century, Zolbrod produces a more complete and culturally sensitive translation. His 1984 publication, Dine, Bahane, The Navajo Creation Story, incorporates linguistic nuances Matthews had missed and presents the narrative in a form that better preserves its original structure and meaning. Zolbrod's documentation confirms and expands upon Matthews' findings regarding the cosmological origin of witchcraft. The narrative Zolbrod presents makes explicit what Matthews had only partially captured. The establishment of witchcraft as part of the created order is not accidental or incidental. It serves a specific cosmological function. By placing the capacity for harm within the same system that produces healing, the Dine Bahane establishes the stakes of moral existence. The Navajo universe is not one where good inevitably triumphs or where evil operates as an external force easily identified and expelled. It is a universe where tremendous power exists in a state of potential, capable of manifesting as either blessing or curse depending on the choices made by those who wield it. This cosmological structure creates a particular kind of danger. The Skinwalker, in traditional Navajo understanding, is dangerous precisely because the source of its power is legitimate. It has not stolen power from illegitimate sources or gained abilities through violation of natural law. Instead, it has taken knowledge that rightfully belongs within the community, knowledge necessary for the community's survival and flourishing, and turned that knowledge against its proper purpose. The Skinwalker represents not the intrusion of chaos into order, but the deliberate choice to create chaos using the very tools meant to maintain order. The documented accounts reveal specific capabilities attributed to these practitioners. They can manipulate perception, appearing in forms other than their own. They can traverse distances with unnatural speed. They can inflict illness, misfortune, and spiritual disruption on their targets. They can corrupt ceremonies and invert sacred protocols. Most troubling, they can do all of this while operating within the same cosmological framework that legitimate practitioners inhabit. There is no separate realm of dark magic, no alternative source of power. There is only the single unified system and the choice of how to employ the knowledge it contains. The response documented in Navajo tradition addresses this structural danger through structural means. The enemy way ceremony and related rituals function not to banish an external evil, but to restore Hojo, to re-establish the balance that Skinwalker activity has disrupted. These ceremonies acknowledge that the power employed by the practitioner of witchcraft comes from the same source as healing power, and they work to redirect the spiritual energy back toward its proper purpose. The goal is not destruction of the witch, but restoration of harmony. The cosmology that allows for the existence of skinwalkers also provides the mechanisms for addressing the harm they cause. Both Matthews and Zolbrod approach their documentation with awareness of the sensitive nature of the material. Certain aspects of ceremonial knowledge remain deliberately undocumented, protected by the communities that hold them. What appears in published form represents what Navajo consultants deemed appropriate for external audiences. Even this limited documentation, however, establishes beyond doubt that the Skinwalker tradition is not a collection of campfire stories or isolated superstitions. It is a coherent element of a sophisticated cosmological system, one that addresses fundamental questions about the nature of power, the reality of moral choice, and the mechanisms by which balance is maintained in a universe that contains the capacity for both creation and destruction. The legacy of this documentation extends far beyond academic circles. As popular culture increasingly appropriates indigenous traditions, often stripping them of context and reducing complex cosmologies to simplistic monster narratives. The work of Matthews and Zollbrod provides essential grounding. Understanding the Dine Bahane's treatment of witchcraft allows for understanding the Skinwalker as Navajo tradition presents it, not as a creature-feature villain, but as a tragic figure who possesses genuine knowledge and genuine power, and who has made the catastrophic choice to employ that power in service of harm rather than healing. The distinction matters profoundly. Popular representations often depict skinwalkers as essentially demonic entities, evil by nature rather than by choice. The documented cosmological origin tells a different and more disturbing story. The skinwalker is dangerous not because it represents something alien to the community, but because it represents a potential within the community, a dark possibility inherent in the same system that produces healing and harmony. Every individual who acquires ceremonial knowledge faces the choice between using that knowledge properly or inverting it. Most choose the path of balance, some do not. The ones who do not become the figures that haunt Navajo tradition and trouble Navajo communities to this day. The documentation provided by Matthews and Zollbrod establishes the intellectual and spiritual sophistication of Navajo cosmology while also confirming the seriousness with which the tradition treats the reality of malevolent spiritual practice. These are not stories told to frighten children or to enforce social conformity through superstition. They are accounts of genuine spiritual danger embedded within a cosmological system that understands power as fundamentally dual in nature. The same knowledge that saves can destroy. The same ceremonies that heal can harm. The difference lies entirely in the choices made by practitioners, and those choices have consequences that ripple through both the human community and the spiritual dimensions with which that community remains in constant relationship. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. Acute Bahane, this story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.